The Bermuda Triangle is a graveyard of secrets, a vast expanse of the North Atlantic where logic dissolves and physics breaks down. The true horror of the triangle is not that objects vanish, but that they are violently pulled into a singularity of immense, unnatural force. And at the heart of this region, a lost 1950s experiment continues to reshape the rules of planetary existence. Dr. Karina Voss, a deep-sea salvage expert specializing in Cold War wreckage, was tracking a complex, recurring bathymetric anomaly, a stable, impossibly deep depression in the ocean floor that defied all known tectonic and geological explanations. Her search led her to the reported loss area of Project Leviathan, an experimental U.S. Navy submarine, lost without trace in the mid-1950s. The wreck was found not resting, but standing vertically on the abyssal plain, half buried in sediment, its hull crushed by external pressure. The light from Karina's heavily shielded submersible, the Triton, revealed the damage was consistent with immense, sudden compression, unlike any natural deep-sea failure. The penetration of the wreck was agonizingly slow. The internal corridors were a nightmare of debris and decay. But the physics were wrong. Within a 50-meter radius of the wreck, the local gravitational constant had changed. Debris, chairs, equipment, even heavy toolboxes, was clinging unnaturally to the ceiling and walls, adhering to a new internal vector of down. The submarine was sunk by its own cargo. In the central lab chamber, Karina found the source of the anomaly, a massive, complex, antique gyroscope mechanism, the Gravitational Cartographer. Designed by a forgotten branch of the Navy in the 1950s, the device was meant to measure and map the Earth's deep core gravity fluctuations in real time, anticipating future seismic and volcanic events. But the device went haywire. It created a localized stable gravity well, a zone of immense, unnatural gravitational pull that created a bubble of altered physics that ultimately crushed and sank the Leviathan. The cartographer, though heavily rusted, was still active, radiating a faint, silent pulse of dark, crushing energy. The surrounding wreck was the epicenter of a localized, internal chaos of direction. Karina found the final, desperate logs of the Leviathan's chief engineer, Commander Elias Thorne. Thorne's logs, scrawled on thick, waterlogged paper, detailed the moment of failure. The device did not just measure gravity, it magnified it. It created an inversion field, where the localized mass of the submarine became the primary gravitational vector. We are falling towards ourselves. Karina quickly understood the horror. The cartographer was still active, now mapping the Earth's future gravitational state. The gravitational records it generated were not static numbers but complex, shifting fields that were actively altering the direction of down within the wreck. She retrieved a series of old paper charts secured to a metal clipboard. They were covered in complex, swirling lines and mathematical symbols that were visibly blurring and moving slightly on the damp paper. Thorne's final data was self-altering. The gravity data was not a snapshot. It was a dynamic, live map of gravitational potential centuries into the future, and the cartographer was using its immense energy to impose these future fields onto the present. The instability was immediately felt. Karina placed a simple compass on a navigation table. The needle violently spun and then locked, pointing directly down into the wooden table, defying the Earth's magnetic north. The cartographer had redefined the directional vector for the immediate area. The cartographer was actively drawing the surrounding mass, the ship, the water, the crew's bodies, to its own center. The phenomenon escalated, demonstrating the true, terrifying power of the cartographer. The massive, directional gravitational pressure began to manifest as an acceleration of local entropy. A small, dense metal object, a wrench, was floating unnaturally against the ceiling of the wreck, held there by the localized inverse gravity field. Karina observed water droplets falling up towards the object. The wrench was now an independent, small gravitational body within the field of the larger, shifting cartographer field. The gravitational field began to warp the physical structure of the submarine itself. Large geometric sections of the rusted metal hull were visibly warping and collapsing inward, not due to external water pressure, but due to the increasing complex gravitational forces radiating from the cartographer. The metal was being condensed and crushed according to the shifting vectors of the future gravitational map. Karina found Thorne's final, heavily iron-bound logbook. The ink had run, but the final, complex equations showed the gravitational constant g was not a static number, but was replaced by a massive, swirling symbol, the mathematical representation of the cartographer's future field. Thorne's last words were a religious terror. It is not mapping the world's weight. It is calculating the moment of its deepest collapse. The psychological effect was crippling. Karina's mind began to lose its anchor in three-dimensional space. Without a stable down, her proprioception failed. She experienced constant, violent vertigo and disorientation, the sensation that her internal organs were being pulled in multiple contradictory directions at once. The constant shifting of the local gravity field was erasing her internal, physical map of her own body. Karina realized the only way to stop the cartographer was to disrupt the massive, antique gyroscope at its center. The rotation of the gyroscope was what generated the stable distortion field. The ship's internal blueprints showed a large, hydraulic clamp system designed to lock the gyroscope in place during seismic events. If she could engage the clamps and stop the rotation, the field might collapse. She reached the main lab, fighting the crushing, shifting weight. The air was heavy and thick with the sound of groaning metal. The entire submarine was being actively condensed. The central gyroscope was spinning violently and radiating a chaotic, dark energy. All the debris in the room was swirling in a central, localized vortex, defying the external ocean gravity. The submersible's external camera view was heavily distorted by the intense gravitational lensing. As she moved toward the hydraulic controls, a piece of debris, a heavy steel table, was violently pulled from the wall and condensed instantly, silently, into a small, dense sphere of metal, which then dropped instantly toward the cartographer. The cartographer was achieving critical mass. Karina reached the hydraulic clamp controls. She activated the sequence. The massive clamps engaged, screaming against the rotating gyroscope. For a moment, the gyroscope fought, radiating a final, intense surge of crushing energy. Then, with a sound like the world sighing, the gyroscope stopped. The localized gravity field collapsed. All the objects adhering to the walls and ceiling instantly fell, crashing to the floor under the uniform pull of Earth's gravity. The chaos was replaced by a terrifying, heavy stillness. The submarine, already structurally compromised, began its final, immediate descent. Karina escaped the Leviathan moments before it was completely crushed, ascending rapidly in the Triton. The submarine was reduced to a central, geometrically perfect sphere of crushed metal and rock, sitting at the bottom of a massive, unnaturally deep, new depression in the sediment. The gravity well had successfully condensed its own container. The cartographer was silenced. The immediate threat was gone, but the field achieved its final victory over its last witness. Karina survived, but the constant, conflicting gravitational forces within the wreck left her with a permanent, neurological anchor. Her sense of balance and direction was irrevocably broken. She suffers from chronic, crippling vertigo. Her mind can no longer distinguish between up and down without a stable visual reference. When she closes her eyes or enters a dark room, her brain instantly reverts to the shifting, chaotic field of the cartographer. She is constantly falling, twisting, and inverting in her own mind. Karina Voss is now a woman permanently condemned to live in a world without a stable directional vector. The ultimate horror of the gravity well cartographer wasn't that the device sank the ship, but that it stole the concept of down from the mind of the only person who saw it.